Hey, Christina here. Today I want to tackle some of the questions that you have asked me. Some are brand new questions, some are older questions, but I chose them all based on the fact that they're questions that I see really frequently, either here on YouTube or other social media or on the blog. I'm covering lots of different homesteading questions. There are quite a few canning questions, but we're covering other topics as well today. I'm just going to start at the top. I had a question about, I think I mentioned this in my last video. Why is it unsafe to can salsa in quart jars? This is a really common question, and I saw it a lot this summer. I think there are a lot of new canners this summer because 2020, and they couldn't wrap their minds around this. Why can you not find a tested safe recipe to can salsa in quart jars? Well, the answer is we don't really know. Sometimes they don't share with us why it is unsafe to do something or why there isn't a recipe for something we want to can. So I think there's basically two options. One is they didn't test it. And that's possible because the funding for testing, which is usually done by either a private corporation like Ball or more commonly, it is done by extension offices. And extension offices they don't have a lot of funds. It's just not a priority in today's modern world to give funds to the extension department. So that's why you don't see a lot of new recipes coming out for canning. And it might be the reason there isn't a tested safe recipe for canning salsa in quarts. It may be that they haven't tested it yet. But another possibility is with salsa, you're canning a lot of foods that are low acid. And it could be that when you are increasing quantities to put it in a quart jar, that it becomes unsafe without adding tons of vinegar, which wouldn't taste very good. It could also be a density issue. With salsa, it's important one of the reasons it's important to follow the recipe is that it has to be the right mix of liquid to solids. Otherwise, you will end up with something that the heat doesn't penetrate all the way through, and you end up with a product that isn't safe to eat. So we don't know which reason it is that there is no tested safe recipe for canning salsa in quart jars. So a lot of people think, well, I've done it, nobody died. Well, you kind of know if you've watched my videos how I feel about that answer. But briefly, I'm going to say that is like saying I drive home drunk every night and I've never been in a wreck, so it's safe to drive home drunk. No, you've just been lucky. And eventually, you will get into a wreck. And we can say something similar about using recipes for canning that aren't tested safe. You might be okay, or you might get the stomach flu, or you might get botulism. It's a gamble. So if you do find a recipe for salsa that is canned in quarts, do know that it has not been tested in a laboratory and it could potentially make somebody sick. Next, I have, let's see, this was a question that went with the video that I did about Australorps being our favorite chicken breed. And somebody asked, how old on average are they when they start getting stingy or lazy about laying eggs? Because we were talking specifically about egg layers, although Australorps are dual purpose and they have enough meat on them that if you wanted to butcher them and eat them, you certainly could. So all chicken breeds are about the same when it comes to when they start slacking off when it comes to laying. And that is generally around year 3. Now, if you use a light in the winter, like you set up a lamp in your coop during the winter to help the hens lay more during the winter, it wears out their bodies faster. They have within their bodies only so many eggs that they can lay in their lifetime. So you might find that at year 2, your hens start laying fewer eggs because you have kind of forced them to lay more than they naturally would. That said, Australorps generally lay very well during the winter, and that's one of the reasons we love them. Of all the chicken breeds we've tried, they are definitely the best winter layers. Somebody also asked if it was true if birds of prey leave Australorps alone because they're black and resemble crows. Interestingly enough, I had never heard this theory that if you have black chickens in your flock, that birds of prey like hawks will leave them alone because hawks don't like crows. Apparently they don't get along well. I'd never heard that until this last year when I had a hawk for the first time ever come and try and snatch one of our hens. Now, the hen in question was an Australorp mix who was gray, or sort of a silver gray color. But she was surrounded by lots of black Australorps. It did not deter the hawk at all. Now, it was probably a more aggressive breed of hawk, but nevertheless, it was the first time ever that we've had a hawk try to get one of our chickens, and we've had chickens that weren't black before. So in my experience, I would say that this is a myth. We ended up having to cover our run with a netting kind of. We actually used snow fencing, that orange stuff you see, and we haven't had a problem since. So sorry if you are free-ranging your chickens. I don't think, in my experience, that having black chickens is going to help keep other predators away. I did a video not long ago on how to can chicken, and somebody asked how long do those jars last. The truth is, oh, Loki says hi. He says I'm outside not doing anything, so I better pet him. The truth is that all canned goods have approximately the same shelf life. I know a lot of canning books will say consume within a year. This is the difference between an expiration date and a best by date. So the food is considered to taste better and have more nutrients in it if you consume it within a year. But as long as the seal on the jar is good and you used a tested safe recipe, that food is perfectly safe to eat. After approximately the 1 year mark, the food gradually begins losing nutrients and color and then flavor. But as time canners will tell you, we have often eaten jars of food that was 10 or more years old and it still tasted great. So as long as you use a tested safe recipe and those lids are still sealed, you're good to go. I also had a question on canning books. Somebody just starting out and they want to know what books they should use as reference. This is a great question. If you are just starting out in particular, but also as just a general rule of thumb, I recommend that you stick with the ball canning books. And if I had to pick only one, it would be this one. This is my absolute favorite, The Complete Book of Home Preserving. I love this book because I think it does a good job of explaining how to can and some of the main science behind canning. So if you have questions about why or how to do something, this book gives really good information. Plus, I think of this as my canning Bible. It's pretty beat up, I don't know if you can tell, because this is the book I use the most. It has good basic recipes that I use over and over again. If I wanted another book on top of this one, I would say it would be the current Ball Blue book. It's also very good, and the recipes are great, and a lot of people swear by it. I just happen to prefer this one. And for non-book information, I recommend the National Center for Home Food Preservation website. If you go to Ball, and that includes their website, or the National Center for Home Food Preservation website, you know you're getting safe, tested recipes, and that's the big thing. You're also going to get really good information also on the National Center for Home Food Preservation website on what is safe and what is not. Let's see. And the last one is also a canning question. Jackie says, I'm new to canning. Last night I canned some carrots, raw pack, and put some onion soup mix in with the simmering water. After processing, the seals seem to be good and tight, but the outside rim where you screw the band on is a bit sticky. Should I throw it away? I'm absolutely paranoid about this. I use the instructions in the canner manual and the National Center for Home Food Preservation website. Okay, so there's a couple issues here. I'm glad you use the National Center for Home Food Preservation website. Canning manuals are sometimes not the best source of information. It seems crazy, but sometimes they're contrary to what we know are the most current and safe practices. So that's one little issue. The second issue is I want to talk about how you added soup mix to your canned carrots. It sounds yummy. I bet it is good. But what was in that soup mix? Were all the ingredients safe for canning? For example, a lot of times those packets for canning soup have flour in them or cornstarch as thickener, and neither of those are considered safe for canning. And you know, maybe there were other things even in there that were considered unsafe for canning. So my first big question mark is you probably should not have used the soup mix in your carrots. And just based on that, I probably would take that food and freeze it or consume it right away. I would not trust the food to sit in the pantry with ingredients that are not safe for canning, because I'm super careful about stuff like that. The other thing is her actual question, which is that the seals seem to be tight, but the outside is sticky. So this happens a lot when food siphons from the jar. And there are lots of reasons food siphon from the jar. The two main ones are that you either overfilled the jars, so your headspace was not quite correct, or your canner was too hot, meaning since she was pressure canning carrots, I hope she was pressure canning, maybe you were running it at too high a PSI, or if you let the temperature fluctuate. So if it goes up and down, and isn't fairly steady, it can cause siphoning. The good news is, as long as they sealed correctly, they're safe. But you do want to wash those jars. It's a good practice just to wash jars after you can them anyway, to get off any food residue that may cause, that may spoil. So it might mold or it might cause botulism, and you might not have botulism in the jar, but if you have it outside the jar and then you pour the food out, it can be contaminated. So if you have any questions about homesteading, doesn't have to be about canning, doesn't have to be about chickens. It can be any homesteading topic, including annoying kitties who are really good mousers. Please leave a comment, and if I don't do a video about it, I will certainly answer your question in the comments, or I might include it in a future video. And in the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll share it, like, subscribe, all those things are really helpful. Thanks so much. See you later. Bye. You are a silly cat.